Elijah Watson, against.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Elijah Watson here in opposition to SB1040. Now, the last time this bill was heard in the Senate, there was a lot of false claims made in support for the bill. So I think it would be good if I debunk some of these claims while providing my opposition to this egregious piece of legislation. Unlike many of the claims made by those who approve of this bill is fundamentally discriminatory because by allowing for a student's family to claim legal damages and have that student be segregated from another student based solely on the fact that one of the students is transgender and therefore of a different biological sex, especially if the transgender student has not done anything to provoke such a reaction that damages a student's emotional well-being or anything of that nature, there is a clear demonstration of prejudice against the transgender student on the basis of their gender identity. In the other chamber, it was also stated that the Supreme Court's decision in Bostock to include gender identity in Title VII's definition of sex was strictly enforced and not applied to the conversation on bathroom bans. However, after doing some research on the textual similarity between Title VII and Title IX, Title VII maintains a because of sex language, which is very, very similar to the same language we find in Title IX, which reads on the basis of sex. This is a classic case of tomato, tomato with these phrases. Essentially, this means that the regulations found in Title VII restricting discrimination against employees because of their sex, which has been previously ruled to include gender identity, does have some binding with the regulations found in Title IX, restricting discrimination against students on the basis of sex. So yes, the separation of two students sleeping in the same room as one another on the basis of a student's gender identity can firmly be interpreted to violate Title IX, given its clear similarity to Title VII, and will potentially cause for a massive amount of litigation to arise if this bill is signed into law. I urge you to vote against this very discriminatory bill, and I'll answer any questions.
Members, any questions?
Any questions?
Representative Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Elijah, because Mr. Watson, sorry. I'm wondering why you didn't bring up the 11th Circuit case that states that bathroom bans place an undue burden against transgender and gender nonconforming students, essentially violating their equal protection.
Yes, so Madam Chair, Representative Gutierrez, I actually didn't cite that case because, well, that was the case regarding St. Johns County School Board in Florida. But the reason that I didn't cite that case is because that ruling is not binding. However, what I will say is that the judicial precedent that is brought out by that case can still be applied here by proving that a similar policy that forces transgender or gender nonconforming students to use bathrooms that belong to their biological sex has been struck down in other states by a federal court. And in those courts, they ruled that this type of policy, or I guess in this case, it would be SB1040, which is a proposed law, places an undue burden against transgender and gender nonconforming individuals simply on the basis of their gender identity.
Thank you. Can I have one follow-up,
Please?
Madam Chair, Mr. Watson? Could the sponsor would it be possible to bring a bill that would speak to privacy, someone's own modesty, rather than a bill like this that is discriminatory towards transgender students?
Madam Chair, Representative Gutierrez. We've heard the argument made several times, even in this hearing, but also in the last hearing, that this bill was seeking to address privacy concerns. But I will be the first here to say that if this bill were to be trying to address privacy concerns, then the language in the bill would have to be drastically different than what it is currently. So if you take a look at the damages part of the bill that a student or family can claim that their student suffered if a reasonable accommodation is denied, it talks about physical, emotional, and psychological harm and damages. And so a person, or a student, I guess, could claim that they had psychological and emotional damages just for being in the same sleeping quarters by a transgender individual who has not even provoked them. If these claims did occur, they would be pushing that simply because the individual is transgender and in the same room as them, it caused them harm. And that in itself is discriminatory. So it's very clear that they're not pushing an actual message of privacy concerns. They're just pushing a message of discrimination.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair.
Please,
Thank you.
Representative Gutierrez. Excuse me, Representative Terrick.
No. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Watson, can you share, you're a young person, can you share what your experience has been like sharing space with trans people over the last several years in high school, and what that looks like for you?
Yeah, so,
Watson?
yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Terrick, I actually heard one of the previous speakers say that the shower problem, right? How they're concerned that what's it called? Transgender individuals are going to shower with people, and Representative Gutierrez made her claim that that's not actually happening in our public schools, right? And to that point, I think it's really a good point to make that that isn't what's happening in the schools, right? Transgender individuals, or me, if I were to go into a shower with another boy, like, I would be suspended as a high school student because I would be participating in an inappropriate action, which is, by the way, against Arizona revised statutes. So I don't think that the narrative that they're trying to push right now, that transgender individuals, by allowing them to be in the same bathroom, is going to create some type of dangerous situation, because there's no evidence to back that up, number one. All the isolated incidents are coming from out of state, but also, yeah.
Madam Chair, follow up.
Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Watson, you talked about dangerous and being a danger. The risk of suicide for LGBTQ youth is so high. How does this bill protect and support our LGBTQ community?
Mr. Watson.
Madam Chair, Representative Tarek, I've got a really simple answer, and I think this is going to shock a lot of the people that are in favor of the bill. It doesn't. And that's all I'm going to say on that.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next